we are up and we are running. I'm going for the Political Uni Bomber look. So bear with me. Basically, we'll talk a little bit about politics this time. We will talk, whenever I do this, as this is not my full-time job, I will talk of everything from sports to books, but today the topic is politics. So you'll find out that I know nothing, but maybe we'll have a good time. I'm doing this for a very specific reason. I think we've gone totally insane with our political situation here. And instead of trying to cover anything, I'm going to do three things. One is, I just kind of wanted to find how I think politics has formed out, how I maybe fit into it as a plus 50-year-old male who's been around the block, who's an American who now works overseas. Maybe to discuss what I call the alternative media and its importance to us, and also go through what I call the big lies are that I'm finding going on. And mind you, I'm only going to cover one or two because I'm not making an epic here. First of all, I'm doing this just because of everything I'm seeing on the media, and that includes places like Fox, MSNBC, CNBC, and the things I see over the internet. Pardon me, I apologize again. A cold is setting in, but in watching it, in my understanding of history, in my understanding of how people are carrying agendas, in my understanding that we really don't have, on at least the mainstream, we don't have media anymore, we have political wings. I really want us to kind of come down to, unfortunately, what our responsibility is as citizens. As people who were brought up, my age, we were brought up in civics, understanding the Constitution, learning political processes, and the impacts of our party system dating back to the original Federalists to now what everybody is calling our current political setup with Republicans and Democrats. And I'm doing it only not for myself, because this will not be my job. I'm doing it because I'm really worried about this country, and I do actually have a son that I hope will have the same opportunity, if not more, than myself and my wife had. Okay. Politics, as I've seen it, mind you, I grew up in Chicago, so basically everybody says, oh, then you're a Democrat. No, I'm one of the few who have come out as a Republican. And the joke I will always remember was where it dated back to actually put in your favorite Democratic president, but I'll use Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton jogging sees a group of puppies, and there's a sign, and the person's selling Democratic puppies. Well, he thinks this is the greatest thing. So the next day he takes Hillary out jogging, and they go around, and they see the big line through the Democratic name, and Republican puppies. And he goes to the person selling them, and he goes, but yesterday you had them as Democratic puppies. And the comment back was, well, today their eyes are open. While I'm not what I would consider a Republican as the Republicans currently define themselves, pardon me, I would define myself more as a Jack Kemp Republican. For those of you who don't know, Jack Kemp, who originally was a quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, served as a Republican congressman from New York in the 80s, was known for the really last major tax overhaul, 1981, the Kemp-Roth tax bill, served as the Secretary of Department of HUD, Housing and Urban Development, under Bush 41. Was also vice presidential candidate for Bob Dole back in 1996. Now, where Kemp was a little different, and you'll hear his name mentioned with Paul Ryan, because I believe Paul Ryan, the current Speaker of the House, worked for him. Kemp basically was a Republican who believed we needed to increase the safety nets. His statement about the economy was that the economy had really bifurcated. Now, mind you, this is back in the 80s. And he says, bifurcated into a land of opportunity for some, But for others, it bifurcated into what the analogy he used is everybody living in the cement houses of Eastern Europe. Now, given he said this back in the 80s, and you look at today's discussion about wage inequality, this is 30 years later, and his arguments about how the economy works, I think, are pretty relevant today. Kemp, as head of HUD, secretary in charge of HUD, was at the time written as one of the only white guys who would go into areas of Harlem and New York and come out alive, because he was into developing the urban areas by putting in enterprise zones, tax-free zones for businesses. He was into basically trying to convert public housing through sweat equity into private housing. Really out of the box thinking, and was actually fairly successful in getting this going. Again, since I wasn't in Washington, I had to work for a living. I wasn't there, so I have to take, what people wrote about Kemp through people like Ronald Reagan, who wrote about Kemp in the Reagan Diaries, or Alan Greenspan, who wrote in Age of Turbulence about Kemp being the one who was always saying we need the safety nets. And he was very creative in supply side thinking of incentives to promote positive behavior to build the economy. Okay? Now, given what I hear out of the politics today, that's not what is being talked about in what I'll call the center Republican Democrat. So as I look how I define myself as a Kemp Republican, what I see today is, the institutional or the corporatists or whatever you want to call them. The Nancy Pelosi doesn't look too different from Paul Ryan to me. The Mitch McConnell doesn't look too different than Harry Reid or Chuck Schumer to me. The people in the middle, Democrats, Republicans, really don't talk a lot differently. So that's one party. It's the people who are there because of corporate money, and they're kept there. Feinstein, the Grahams, John McCain. Okay, that's what I would call the institution. And then you have on one side the progressives, and on the other side the libertarians. Libertarians, I would probably say the Pauls, Senator Rand Paul, and his father Ron Paul. They're probably the most, I guess, purest form of libertarian in government. I know that under the Tea Party, Rubio and the Texas gentleman who now doesn't come to my mind, are considered, I don't know if they qualify or not from the politics I saw in the debates. They look more to be institutional Republicans. I could be wrong. Ted Cruz, the other one, Lion Ted. The other thing is, for all the people out there, you know what? Trump is not a Republican. Free trade is a Republican concept. Open borders is a Republican concept. No tariffs. Very limited barriers to trade. If jobs go overseas, then jobs go overseas. That's libertarian type thinking. No government intervention. And Republicans are usually pro-free trade. So things like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which actually was talked about under Bush 43, and when Condoleezza Rice was Secretary of State, the Colombian trade deal that was pushed, that was shut down under Bush. Actually, quite frankly, I have no idea what trade deals actually got done under the Obama administration. I'd love to hear any comments you have on this. But that's Republicans. Trump shuts it down. Trump telling Ford, saying, you move, I'm going to put a tariff. That is not a Republican idea. So when I hear the politics that Trump is a crazy right-winger, he might be crazy. I'm not going to disagree on certain things. But compared to Mike Pence, I think you have to rethink your arguments. And maybe that's what I'm looking for, is a little sanity in arguments. a little bit of truthism amongst us. So, to that point, that's one side. The other side is the progressive party. Now, people, it depends on who you ask. Most people say that's Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, although many people right now are seeing that both of them played politics with the Democratic National Committee in one way, shape, or form. The Unity Tour of today, Elizabeth Warren not endorsing the male version of herself and then endorsing Hillary. To the progressives, to what I'll call the real aggressive progressives, that's unforgivable. Other names, Tulsi Gabbard, are brought up. A few others that have come up. That's kind of the progressive side. And what's odd is that used to be called the loony left and the flying monkey right. If you actually look at them, they have some policies that they have some pretty big agreement in. Ending the drug war. Both of them agree on that. Getting money out of politics. Both the sides agree on that. Pro-life versus pro-choice. Pro-choice, a lot of people who are libertarians are like, the government should not be involved in this, so they would tend to say they're pro-choice. So you have some very significant agreement among what people call the lunatics. Where they differ is, getting the money out of politics. The libertarians are, if you reduce government's role to as little as possible, that will get the money out of politics the most effective way, because the government will not have the control. Where the progressives want to do it through a constitutional amendment. And again, Citizens United case, since then, money in politics has gotten worse. Now, from a constitutional side, I think that was the right choice. But that means we need to do something to get money out of politics. There's some choices in the Supreme Court that, while constitutionally incorrect, have opened up very, very dangerous waters. But that'll be for another video if I ever do it. Okay. The importance of alternative media and maybe what I'm doing now. Because I'm not in the country, I used to listen to talk radio, which talk radio primarily is more conservative. I haven't been around. Mark Levine, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, those dominate the airways. Rush Limbaugh. What I'm seeing on the internet, while I haven't found or I've looked for the YouTube videos of the conservatives, I tend to watch more of the progressives, the same progressive. The whole TYT network, Cenk Uygur started, including his group, Jimmy Dore, the secular talk. I tend to listen to those more than I do conservative discussions, because for the one reason, if I'm really going to try and convince people, the only way you're going to do that is by understanding their argument. First, if I'm just debating people I agree with, what's there really to debate? But the second side, and this is something that I do actually have with my conservative brotherhood, is the arguments of the progressive have a lot of validity behind them. Money in politics has become dangerous. Healthcare has not been working. Okay, if I tend to remember Romney Care, I don't consider a conservative idea, but the whole Affordable Care Act is not really a progressive idea, and in fact, because it's half-baked, it is more destructive than anything. And believe me, as I work overseas, I have insurance for my son and wife through my job, but I was looking, if in case I decided to try and get a job in the U.S. getting insurance, having a $10,000 deductible kind of makes the whole idea of getting insurance a non-starter, because all you seem to be buying is catastrophic coverage. And the fact that in some states, I mean, in the state I was in, South Carolina, only had one provider. That's not competition. That promotes what it is: horrible health care insurance programs. And quite frankly, there were certain discussions. I forget or don't know how to pronounce his name. Peter Orszag was chairman. Actually, he was head of the budget under the Congressional Budget Office under Bush 43, his last 2 years. Obama asked him to be head of the management of budget and management of the budget office in his administration. And he didn't want to take it because he actually wanted to talk about and implement healthcare change, not insurance change. And when you looked at Obama, probably the one president who did walk into a disaster, he had the chance for the biggest mandate ever, okay? And he didn't really do it. And this guy, Peter Orszag, he basically wanted to really look at healthcare. So not just how do you cover people, but how do you treat people? And he looked at different projects within it, and looking at maybe surgery wasn't always the answer, prescription drugs weren't always the answer. Maybe, this type of program through rehabilitation was better for physical instead of surgery. He was looking at different treatment ways to contain costs. And according to a book called Confidence Men, written by Ron Susskind out of the Wall Street Journal, about the run of President Obama to presidency, and then his first 4 years in office, his economic team, that was, Orszag said, if you're willing to do healthcare reform, I will join your team. And I think he left that 2 years seriously disappointed. Okay, but getting back to progressive media, one is you can't ignore their points, okay? And things like minimum wage. I do not think you can legislate wages. Number two is minimum wage usually hurts. When you raise it significantly, it hurts the people it's set out to help. Okay? But if you look at it, dating back, I believe under Ronald Reagan it was $4.65. I believe it's $7 an hour now. Now, if you believe inflation is about 3%, that means costs double every 15 years or so. We're 30 odd years later. So if you take I'm going to do it in round numbers so the math is easier. If you're taking wage at $5 an hour, 30 years later should have doubled twice. You're looking at, to be comparable, minimum wage should be around $20 an hour. I've heard other people say 22, I don't know. But the idea is it is significantly down. And it is to the point that we have to recognize that the lack of wage growth has been catastrophic. Okay? So just by ignoring minimum wage, not talking about it, blowing it off, I think doesn't put you in a position to try and govern. Okay? And I think you have to deal with that head on. Like right now I'm trying to do. You have to deal with that wage inequality. Now, the arguments that I've heard, we must make everything a living wage. Okay, does that mean the babysitter gets $20 an hour? I don't think people will ever go out again unless you're filthy rich. Does the teenager who goes to work at McDonald's get them a living wage? Some of them might need them. I'm not ignoring that. But $20 an hour, $15 an hour, that's an important thing to worry about. Now, when I listen to the progressive news, the groups I mentioned, what I actually do like is that for the most part, and mind you, I don't watch every one of them, and I differ with them on policy, they actually do some news reporting. They actually do some honest news reporting. They actually cover topics that need to get covered. So when you see Jordan Cherokee cover Flint, no, I don't watch CNN all the time, but I haven't seen too many CNN stories on Flint, Michigan. And while I understand who's in charge of that is who? The city, the mayor, the governor. There will come a point that somebody needs to do something. The governor has a right to call in resources, such as the National Guard. Do you think maybe he could call in the Army Corps of Engineers to try and fix the problem? I think somebody needs to put a plan together on that, because, one, I could be wrong, but it's a year later that I remember hearing about the story. Now, originally, and this is where I talk about the reason why the alternative network is important, is a year ago, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow covered that story and went after it like a dog going after a bone. Now all I hear from her is Russia, are we done with Trump, collusion, impeachment. She doesn't talk about it much anymore. People could argue with me, I would, but again, maybe I missed the memo. But George Sheraton went and covered. They're talking about what happened in East St. Louis, in southern Indiana, about the problems there. So I give them kudos to at least provide a media outlet where people can get more of the news outside the institution. Because even right now, you have either Fox, which is the right, and you have everybody else who's the left, NPR, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, MSNBC. They're all functioning as political arms to a party, mostly Democratic, which makes, again, by math, Fox the most popular since it is one of the few conservative stations to tell that side. But none of that's being covered by these news networks. Seth, the CNBC, the DNC gentleman. Now I'm